On a cold spring night in March of 2021, three teenage boys would set out on a robbery spree that would eventually lead to the death of a man. But as shocking as this story already is, targeting people at random, it would be the twisted actions of the boys after the murder took place that makes this situation 10 times worse than it already is. At around 11 PM on the 24th of March 2021, three teenagers, 18-year-old Leigh and Bailey, along with two teens who at this moment in time can't be named for legal reasons, so we'll call them Boy A and Boy B, were walking along a canal path near Pilling Street in the town of Leigh. Leigh is a town on the smaller side that lies between Wigan and Manchester. The trio had been with Boy A's friend, Nathan Shaw. Now, although Nathan and Boy A knew each other, he wasn't known to Liam or Boy B. Either way, prior to them walking down the canal path, they had visited a Morrison's supermarket, followed by the group smoking a cannabis joint behind the Holiday Inn. It was from there they made their way down to the canal path, where essentially Nathan was to be robbed. But even before they had touched the canal path, Nathan would say that Liam and Boy B had become agitated with him out of nowhere and was trying to pick a fight with him. But he still decided to head down the canal path anyway, even though he had second thoughts about it. As they approached the canal, Nathan would be using the torch on his phone when Boy B tried to grab it from behind. After a scuffle for the phone, the violence would escalate. Nathan would go on to be kicked several times before being stabbed, and then the group fled. In the end, he would keep his possessions and they made off with nothing. Boy A returned to check up on Nathan to see if he was okay. Nathan asked Boy A if he'd been stabbed, to which he responded that he had been, and it was later revealed in hospital that he'd been stabbed twice in the back. Nathan even gave a false statement to police about the incident, claiming he'd been attacked by a man hiding in a bush because he, quote, didn't want to grass on anyone. In court, he would go on to explain to the jury that he was in fact stabbed and that Boy B was the one who did it. His reason for now coming clean, he said he didn't want Liam or Boy A getting convicted for a crime they played no part in. Back to the events of the night though, and Boy A returns to Boy B and Liam Bailey as they've just made off after Nathan Shaw had just been stabbed. From here, all we know is that the group met a friend by the name of Logan Atherton, where they collected a backpack off him which contained either a weapon or weapons that would be used in the eventual murder. In court, Liam denied that Logan had been the person who he collected this backpack off, and when he was hit with phone evidence that he made several calls to him at the time in question, he simply brushed it off and said that he was, quote, off his head on drugs and was seeing if they wanted to meet. But phone evidence also placed the trio at Therymere Street, the street Logan had lived on. From here, the group then made their way to Boy B's home before Boy A arranged to meet an unnamed male who was looking to buy some cannabis. It was now the early hours of the morning, 3:30 AM. When the unnamed male met the group, Boy A was accompanied by Liam Bailey and Boy B. Out of nowhere, it's thought that Liam Bailey grabbed the man by the throat with both hands before pushing him away, pulling out a machete and demanding that he hand his phone over. The man took his phone out of his pocket as if he was about to hand it over, but in an instant he turned and managed to flee, escaping the trio. At around 4 AM, 33-year-old Scott Anderton was captured on CCTV walking through Leigh bus station, carrying a plastic bag and wearing only one shoe. Unsurprisingly, given the time of the night, Leigh town centre was almost empty apart from the trio and Scott. It was to no surprise then, particularly as Leigh is a small town, that Scott Anderton had the tragic misfortune of running into the three. Roughly 15 minutes after Scott was initially caught on CCTV, he was captured on there once again, this time with Liam and the two boys at the junction of Railway Road and Wilkinson Street. Just like we've seen already in this story though, the three lured him to the entrance of the canal path. The group were discussing drugs with Scott throughout their journey through the town centre, and Scott had asked the boys if they had any cannabis for sale. They responded that they did, but they would have to go down the canal path out of the sight of the cameras. We don't know exactly what happens next because there's conflicting stories from the boys involved, and all we do know from the pathologist report is that Scott would be subject to a knife attack where he sustained 35 stab injuries from his head to his shins. According to boy A, he claimed that after Scott had been stabbed multiple times, he was pushed into the canal where he was gasping for air, and he heard him saying, quote, "I'm dying, I'm dying." Then, after murdering Scott Anderton, Leigh Bailey used his phone flashlight to search Scott's bag for anything worth taking before discarding it in the canal. They then fled the scene, going to Liam's home, but returned to the scene 45 minutes later. Then, in the early hours of the morning, they caught a bus into Manchester, which arrived at 7 AM. Around the same time, Scott's body would be discovered in the canal by a woman on her way to work. But this is where the story gets even more sickening than it already is. After returning to Leigh at some point later on that same day, the boys returned to the scene once again after they became interested at the considerable police presence. Here, Snapchat videos were taken of the crime scene. Boy A's voice is captured in one Snapchat saying, quote, "hot in Leigh town," with another found on boy A's phone with a rainbow and cloud caption saying, quote, "good vibes," glorifying what they had just done. It would also be around this time that boy B would do an internet search for, quote, "how long do you get for a murder?" Either way, all three would go on to be arrested in the early hours of the following morning, and they'd eventually be charged in connection with the attempted robbery spree and murder. They all denied the charges brought against them, but Leigh Bailey did in fact plead guilty to the murder charge. After a recent trial at Manchester Crown Court, all three would be found guilty on all charges brought against them, and they're due to be sentenced on the 12th of November 2021. What should be noted though is that one of the boys, the report doesn't make it clear which one it is, was convicted on the lesser charge of manslaughter, not murder. But it wasn't just these incidents that the boys were convicted for. You see, back in September of 2020, both boy A and Leigh Bailey had been involved in an incident in where they had left a man with life-changing injuries after assaulting him. That's all we know so far in this story though. As of yet, no mugshots have been released, not even of Liam, even though he's over the age of 18. The judge will decide whether the other boys' names and faces will be revealed at the sentencing hearing, so we may not ever know the identities of the other two. It's really sad to think that Scott had his life taken away at random, literally over nothing, all because the boys seemingly wanted to take some of his possessions. I just don't know nowadays why kids don't want to get a job. Yeah, it might not be what you want to do, going to work a 9 to 5, but slow money is better than taking someone's life and losing your own life to jail.